Hello everyone! So my name is Justin and I was a grad at the University of Western Governors University, and I make videos on my experience that I did in the last 6 months when I completed the Masters of Curriculum and Instruction. And I also share videos on, the career journey, the academic journey, anything related to that. And I apologize I haven't made a video in a couple weeks. It's been really cold where I live, so I live in Canada, and it might be hard to believe, but it's been about minus 40 degrees Celsius, which is, I believe, the same in Fahrenheit. It kind of converts to be the same. And it actually makes everything really challenging because the apartment gets really cold because the heater can't keep up with heating, and then there's a draft and blah, blah, blah. So it just becomes very hard to do much of anything, and even making videos and working and whatnot. So today, I thought I would make this video because this was a strategy that I employed back in the day in, I believe it would have been sometime May last year, around then June, basically the month before I started at Western Governors. And it's this idea of pre-gaming, which is a term that I wouldn't have normally used, but actually there's another person on YouTube that used this word to describe what he did to complete his MBA in in 12 days, which is crazy. I don't even know how that's possible. So, his name is, I believe it's pronounced Josh Madakor. And I'll just flash his video that he made about that, and then he's made another one about how he's starting another degree and doing the same process. Now, I do talk about this actually in one of my first videos, whether it's the first one or second one, I can't remember, about how I basically got the ball rolling before I even started. And that's really strategic if you are on the accelerated path at Western Governors or any similar type of program. So what this means, pre-gaming, is doing some preliminary work before you launch into the program. Because keep in mind with Western Governors, you are paying for a block of time. So let's say 6 months is their term, and you can do as many courses as you want. So if you're able to do work before that 6 months, you've obviously got a head start. But the question is, how do you even do that? Because they don't give you access to that online material before you start. When you first start, you do have access to the orientation, and you do have access to looking at kind of the interface of the portal. And in some cases, you can look at the first page of each course, but it doesn't tell you what the specific assignments are. So it becomes a little bit challenging to know, well, how would I even go about pre-gaming? So I'm going to talk about what I did specifically. So when I first started, I actually had contact with my mentor a couple weeks before the start date, and immediately I asked her to give me an overview of what the first course was going to be. And so she did, and she basically gave me some bullet points as to those main topics in the course. Those topics are actually very similar to what's in the program guide or program overview booklet that are on the websites. So I believe most program has this, and I'll try to put some sort of screen capture to show that. And what that is a walkthrough of all the different topics in the courses. It's almost like an overview document, you could say. Now, you can take that information, and even though it's quite general, they do point you towards some subtopics, and it's up to you to decide how you want to learn that. In my case, I had basically looked at a bunch of YouTube videos on those related topics, and I started taking notes, and I started exposing myself to that content so that it became more familiar before I even started. And this was primarily for the very first course. When you first start the program, they will probably give you access to those initial 4 courses. So you could actually do this for the 4 courses, though your mentor might not give you an overview for each one of those courses. Mine only gave me an overview for the course that I was about to take, or the course that I was in at that time, or registered in. Now, there is documents online that are called course of study documents or plans, and I've talked about this in another video. It appears that Western Governors doesn't really want to disseminate these, even though they've put them online if you search for them in Google, and they're a little bit more thorough of an overview document compared to those program plans that I just showed. Now you could use those to start to indicate what are those key topics you'll need to know. And in a way, it's up to you to decide how you want to learn that. So, I also at the time, I was able to gain access to the textbook or some of the readings by asking my mentor at the time what those were. And so I was able to find them online. And I also had access to a library in my city, which was actually a library at my previous university, where I could get that textbook and start looking through it as well. So that's one strategy that you could start to think about. Now, Josh's strategy is a little bit different because he's not waiting to talk to his mentor a couple weeks before he starts the program. He's just basically making a list of all the courses and then finding resources specific to those courses to help get a thorough understanding of the course content. So whether you have to go do like a LinkedIn Learn or Coursera, or you can again find some sort of video series online. And there are people in forums, whether they're on Reddit or whatnot, that have done the courses as well that you are probably going to be taking. And they may have actually walked through some very specific resources that they used in conjunction with the Western Governor resources once you're in those courses. So you could make note of those resources and essentially you can start the process. So if it's a video series, start watching the videos, start making notes. Now it's useful to recall that information and test yourself. So you will have to figure out ways to make that learning stick. It's not enough just to read it and then hope for the best. So you will have to find resources that maybe have different kind of objective assessments, so like tests or quizzes, or you can make your own. So, you can find, just search Google flashcard, digital flashcard free, and you can find different tools and apps where you can create your own flashcards. And that's not necessarily a formal test, but what it is testing your understanding, and you can start to look at those flashcards and memorize that information. Now, what's better though is to understand what those courses, what the assessments are for those courses. Are they performance assessment or are they objective assessments? Because if they're performance, generally they're going to be a paper. And so you don't need to memorize a whole bunch of information. That would really be inefficient. The idea is that you would have to know enough about the topic to write about it. And the only issue is you won't necessarily know what's the specific topics you'll be writing about within that overall course. Now, it is possible to search and see if there are WG examples online, like people who have shared their projects online, but this does become a little bit concerning because there might be some plagiarism issues there. So just be careful with what you're taking from online. Now, for me, if I was to do a future program, which I've talked about, another master's in education, but in the either instructional design or learning and technology program, I already have my foot in the door. I also know how the capstone works. The capstone is a very cumbersome project. In some cases, it can be laborious for some people because there's a lot of work involved. Now, if you have an understanding of the capstone for your project, you could also start to get ahead of the game there. Now, keep in mind, if you have human participants, you can't actually conduct your research because you need to get ethics approval before you actually do the research. That's really important to make note of because you have to you can do so much and then you have to stop. Part of that for me is basically choosing a potential topic that would be relevant to that degree program and then kind of framing a research problem, framing a research question, putting together some background information. So you can even start writing a literature review and collecting those resources in an annotated bibliography to help organize those secondary sources, and then start framing it in a way that will make your life easier when you actually go write the final report. You can contact the enrollment advisor or the enrollment counselors as they call them, and ask a little bit about as much as you can to see what are those projects usually, what do they usually look like, what type of topics do they come up in those type of projects, what kind of problems are people trying to solve through those projects, what is the criteria, though they may not be able to give you a very thorough overview of that. The mentor will have more information. If you're linked up with the mentor before you start the program, you could ask those questions as well. In those 2 weeks before I started, my mentor was able to actually give me access to some superior or outstanding capstone projects because they have a database. And that actually helped me understand what are some common research topics and then I started to build ideas around those. It basically acted as inspiration, as well as gave me an overview of what the format would look like for a lot of those capstone reports. But the whole idea here is there anything you can do to get ahead of the game? And in some cases, that may even just be making notes of where you think you might have some skill gaps or knowledge gaps. So if you're going to be doing a course that you might be totally unfamiliar with. So for me, that was differentiated instruction in my last degree because I didn't know what that was. I didn't really do that in my post-secondary teaching because that's more K-12. I started to read about that topic while I was in the program, but before the course started. And so I basically got familiar with the topic, and I made notes of those key characteristics that made that topic unique compared to other topics such as learning and assessment, or other topics such as evaluation of curriculum and whatnot. So see what you can do to get ahead of the game if you're about to start a program, use some of these techniques or take on this approach, or even if you're in your program, maybe look ahead at your courses that you're wanting to take and see if you can prime yourself before you start to make it a little bit easier and more efficient at the onset of that course. Now, just a quick question from all of you. If you're watching these videos, and I know I have a small audience, but they seem to be quite interested in the topics that I share, is tell me what you want to know more about. I can kind of get a sense of that through some of the comments that I get on other videos, but if you want to just leave it in this video of what you want to know more about with Western Governors, whether it is very topic specific, like how to do certain types of assignments, or just general about the university, let me know and maybe I'll make a video in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.